Before the 20th century, humanity lived in a fragile world where any scratch could become a death sentence. It was an era when invisible killers, bacteria, harvested a colossal toll across the entire globe. The spread of bacterial infections knew no borders. Simple but deadly diseases pursued people everywhere, from the damp slums of London to the sun-drenched villages of Asia. The most terrifying enemies of mankind were pneumonia, sepsis, tuberculosis, meningitis, and ordinary wound infections. The survival statistics of those times looked terrifying. Bacterial pneumonia killed up to 40% of all those infected, and among the elderly and children, this figure exceeded 70%. Blood poisoning was practically an absolute death sentence. Mortality reached 90%. Every third woman risked dying from puerperal fever, and half of patients who underwent amputation died from subsequent infection. A quarter of children simply did not live to see their 5th birthday due to common colds that developed into complications. What did they try to treat these diseases with? Doctors had no effective weapons in their arsenal. For a long time, bloodletting was practiced, which only weakened an already dying person. Wounds were cauterized with red-hot iron or doused with carbolic acid, causing terrible chemical burns. Mercury, arsenic, iodine, and alcohol were used. At best, the patient was provided with rest and warmth, relying on their own immune system. Medicine could diagnose death, but could not prevent it. But in September 1928, a Scottish microbiologist named Alexander Fleming enters this story. He worked in a stuffy and perpetually cluttered laboratory at St. Mary's Hospital in London, researching Staphylococcus aureus, the bacterium responsible for suppuration and blood poisoning. Fleming was not known for his tidiness. Leaving for a 2-week vacation, he left a stack of unwashed Petri dishes with bacterial cultures on the laboratory table. The laboratory window was left slightly open, and through it, spores of an ordinary basement fungus crept inside. Returning, the scientists began sorting through the dirty dishes. In one of the dishes, he noticed a strange picture. A greenish mold called Penicillium notatum had grown on the agar layer, and around it, a perfectly transparent zone had formed. The mold had not simply slowed the growth of the Staphylococcus, it had completely dissolved the bacteria at a distance. Mold on bread itself does not heal. Consuming it is useless and dangerous. The healing property belonged to the juice that this fungus secreted during its life activity. Extracting this pure substance, penicillin, became an enormously complex engineering challenge, later solved by scientists Howard Florey and Ernst Chain. If the preparation process is translated into understandable language, it looked like this. First, the fungus was seeded into bottles with liquid nutrient broth made from sugar and salts. After a few days, a thick gray-green crust grew on the surface. Then the broth from under the mold was drained and filtered through ordinary cheesecloth, clearing it of pieces of fungal mycelium. After that, the resulting liquid was mixed with special solvents at low temperature to literally pull penicillin molecules out of the water. In the final stage, the solution was purified with activated charcoal and evaporated, yielding a pure, concentrated yellowish powder, which was then dissolved in sterile water. The resulting liquid solution was administered to patients by intramuscular or intravenous injections, since penicillin had to enter the bloodstream directly. Because the kidneys excreted the drug from the body incredibly quickly, in the early years, injections had to be given every 2 to 3 hours, literally day and night. Experimental use began in 1941. The first person to receive penicillin was a London police officer named Albert Alexander. He had scratched his face on a rose thorn, developed a severe sepsis, his face was covered in abscesses, and doctors were already preparing for his death. After the very first penicillin injections, a miracle occurred. His temperature dropped, the inflammation subsided, and the patient began to recover. Unfortunately, the first supplies of the drug ran out quickly, and he could not be saved at that time, but the concept itself had been proven. The next tests on children were already 100% successful. Widespread use unfolded in the midst of World War II. In 1942 to 1943, American chemical giants launched factories for deep fermentation of mold in enormous vats. Penicillin became the chief ally of the American and British armies. If in World War I, thousands of soldiers died from gangrene and wound infection, now the wounded returned to duty within a week. The drug saved lives from pneumonia, syphilis, gonorrhea, and surgical infections. Over all the time since its discovery, penicillin and the antibiotics developed from it have saved, by the most conservative estimates, more than 200 million people. It increased the average human life expectancy on the planet by approximately 10 to 15 years. and forever close the grim era of helplessness before the invisible world. If you enjoyed this story about how ordinary carelessness and a dish of mold saved millions of lives, hit like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new captivating stories about humanity's greatest discoveries.